Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Grace Bennett believed in quiet excellence. Every morning, she arrived at Heart Marketing Solutions before sunrise, her neatly pressed blouse glowing under the pale office lights. Her desk was always immaculate, pens lined like soldiers, files arranged alphabetically. Despite her brilliance with data models and performance analytics, no one ever seemed to notice her. Her colleagues gossiped about designer brands and rooftop dinners, things she had no interest in. They saw her as ordinary, too simple, too modest for the competitive London corporate world. But what they didn't know was that Grace's modesty was her armor and her silence her strength. Behind her quiet smile was a life no one would have believed. Because every evening, Grace went home to Kensington, where she lived with her husband, Oliver Pierce, a billionaire businessman whose name commanded respect across industries. They met before his fortune, built on trust and shared values, but she had insisted on keeping their marriage private. She wanted to be respected for her own work, not for her husband's empire. Oliver had supported that choice. True strength doesn't need to shout, he'd told her. Grace carried those words with her each day until the office cruelty began testing just how strong she really was. The first insults came wrapped in laughter. Grace, still bringing those homemade sandwiches? Tiana Blake sneered from the break room. You really should try Pret sometime. It's not that expensive. Mark Ellis joined in, smirking. She probably spends her lunch money on Excel courses. Even Lauren Price, who once shared jokes with Grace, now avoided her to stay in the clique's good graces. Every word chipped away at her spirit, but Grace said nothing. She learned that silence often reveals more strength than argument ever could. Then came the accidents. One morning, as Grace prepared her weekly performance report, Tiana knocked a full cup of coffee across the pages. Oops, she said, smirking. The dark liquid bled through the grass Grace had spent nights perfecting. The others laughed, and Grace simply murmured, "It's all right," though her hands trembled. That evening at home, Oliver noticed the faint brown stains on her sleeve. "Who hurt you?" he asked quietly. Grace shook her head. "Just office jokes." But when she lay awake that night, she knew those jokes were turning into poison. By Friday, the air in the office was thick with hostility. Tiana strutted in wearing her new red heels, tossed her bag onto Grace's desk. "Hold that for me, sweetheart," she said mockingly. Mark laughed. Maybe she likes playing maid. The laughter that followed wasn't funny. It was cruel. Lauren looked away, pretending to type, guilt twisting in her expression. Grace's chest tightened, but she refused to let tears fall. She had endured too much to give them the satisfaction. But the cruelty escalated. When Grace reached for a mug, a gift from Oliver that read, "To my brightest mind," Mark kicked her chair, sending the mug crashing to the floor. The sound shattered through the room. Before she could pick up the shards, Tiana tossed a can of cola toward her desk, the fizzy drink splashing across Grace's cardigan. "You're a mess," Tiana laughed. Silence followed, then more laughter. Grace stood, calm but trembling, and said softly, "Excuse me." Without another word, she walked out, dignity intact, though her heart broke with each step. Grace pressed her back against the cold stairwell wall, breathing unevenly. Her chest burned from humiliation, but she refused to cry. Then she heard footsteps, familiar, steady. "Grace," came Oliver's deep voice. He was there, in his tailored navy suit, eyes dark with worry. "What happened?" She looked away, ashamed. "It's nothing," she whispered. "Work stress." He frowned. "Your clothes are soaked, your hands are shaking, and you call that nothing?" He pulled out his phone. "I'll buy that company by Monday morning." Grace caught his hand, her voice firm. "No, if you fix this for me, I'll never know if I was capable of standing on my own." Oliver hesitated, jaw tense. "They don't deserve your grace." She smiled faintly through her tears. "That's exactly why I must keep it." He sighed and brushed his thumb across her cheek. "You're stronger than anyone I know." She nodded, breathing deeply. "Let me face this. But promise me, if I fall, you'll stand beside me." "Always," he said. Saturday was quiet. Grace sat by the window, watching rain trace patterns across the glass. Oliver worked in his study but kept checking on her. At lunch, he placed a warm cup of tea in front of her. "You can quit, you know," he said softly. Grace smiled. "And let them believe they broke me?" No. She spent the rest of the day reviewing files, drafting reports, and replaying the incidents in her mind. By evening, she was no longer the timid employee. They had awakened the fighter within her. Sunday brought clarity. Grace compiled every bit of proof she had, security footage, screenshots of cruel messages, timestamps. She formatted them into a detailed report and ended with one line. This is not revenge. It's accountability. That night, she felt lighter. Oliver found her asleep at the desk, documents neatly stacked beside her laptop. He covered her with a blanket and whispered, "My brave girl." Tomorrow, justice would begin. Monday dawned bright and cold. Grace walked into the building in her usual modest outfit, a gray blazer, neat bun, and soft determination in her eyes. The same people who mocked her barely recognized her presence. She went straight to HR, placed a report on the director's desk, and said calmly, "I'd like this investigated." Within the hour, the legal department had the files. The whispers began almost immediately, confusion rippling through the office. When Grace returned to her desk, Tiana tried to mock her again. "That cardigan's still ugly," she said, but there was a tremor in her voice. Grace didn't respond. By noon, Tiana, Mark, and Lauren were summoned by HR. The footage told the truth in brutal clarity. The laughter, the coffee, the soda. Mark turned pale. Tiana stammered excuses, but the director's expression was cold. For the first time, Grace saw fear in her eyes. And it wasn't hers to carry anymore. Upstairs, a different conversation was unfolding. Pierce Holdings, Oliver's firm, had just completed the purchase of Heart Marketing Solutions. The news spread like wildfire. Billionaire Oliver Pierce acquires controlling shares of HMS. No one knew why. The timing, however, could not have been more poetic. In the cafeteria, phones buzzed with the headline while Grace continued typing quietly, as though unaware that her husband now owned the company. Tiana stormed over, red-faced. "You think you've won because of your little complaint? You'll regret this." Grace looked up slowly. "If you're worried, maybe you should think about why." Before Tiana could retort, a deep voice echoed from the corridor. "Is there a problem here?" Every head turned. Oliver stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, gaze sharp as steel. Silence fell like a curtain. Oliver's eyes swept the room. "Which one of you is Tiana Blake?" She froze. I am." He nodded. "Good. I've seen your file." He turned to Grace, his tone softening. "Are you all right, Mrs. Pierce?" The room gasped. Every head snapped toward Grace, whose calm expression said it all. "Yes, Oliver," she replied. "I'm fine." Shock rippled across the floor like electricity. "Mrs. Pierce?" whispered someone. "The billionaire's wife?" murmured another. Oliver addressed the staff. "Effective immediately, anyone involved in harassment or misconduct will be suspended pending investigation. Security, escort them out." His voice was even, but the authority in it was thunder. Tiana tried to protest, but the guards were already at her side. Grace stood quietly, watching, not gloating, not angry, just relieved. The office that once laughed at her now stood frozen in silence. By midday, the building was abuzz. People whispered in hallways, glancing at Grace with a mix of fear and admiration. The truth had come out, but her humility remained. When she went to the cafeteria, no one dared laugh. She sat alone, opened her lunchbox of homemade stew, and ate in peace for the first time in months. Lauren approached nervously. "Grace." "I'm sorry," she whispered. Grace looked up gently. "Then make sure you're never silent when someone else is treated that way." Lauren nodded, tears in her eyes. Upstairs, Oliver met with the executives. "Your company failed to protect its own," he said bluntly. "That ends today." He left before they could reply. That evening, Grace joined him outside by the car park. "You didn't have to do that," she said. He smiled faintly. "I didn't, but you deserve a workplace that respects you." She leaned into him, whispering, "Thank you for standing beside me, not in front of me." The next day, Grace received an email titled Executive Board Invitation. Her pulse quickened. Inside the glass conference room, the CEO, Mr. Langley, stood nervously as she entered. Oliver was already there, but remained silent. "Ms. Bennett, Mrs. Pierce," the CEO corrected himself. "We owe you an apology. The way this company treated you was unacceptable." He paused, visibly humbled. We've reviewed your data reports and your initiative ideas. You're one of the best analysts we've ever had. We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Data Strategy." Grace blinked, taken aback. "I'll accept," she said slowly, "on one condition, that we launch a company-wide ethics program to prevent this from happening again." Oliver smiled proudly from his seat. "Name it," said Mr. Langley. Grace straightened. "The Bennett Initiative." The name would soon echo across corporate London. Within weeks, the Bennett Initiative was born, a cultural reform program promoting empathy, fairness, and professional respect. Grace led workshops, encouraged open dialogue, and installed an anonymous reporting system. The once toxic atmosphere began to heal. Employees who once sneered now admired her integrity. She didn't lead with fear, but with quiet strength that inspired loyalty. Oliver often watched her in admiration. "You've changed more than policies, you've changed hearts," he said one evening. Grace smiled. "I just gave them what I once needed, understanding." Her initiative soon became a case study in ethical leadership, cited by business journals. She had turned humiliation into healing, not just for herself, but for everyone around her. The results of the HR inquiry were final. Tiana and Mark were officially terminated. Their reputations shattered, their careers stalled. Lauren, who had shown remorse, was reassigned to Grace's team for training. Grace didn't seek revenge. She sought restoration. "Let her learn," she told HR. "We all make mistakes." Lauren proved herself loyal, defending others who faced ridicule. Justice, tempered by mercy, became Grace's legacy. One evening, Oliver asked, "Do you ever regret not crushing them completely?" Grace smiled. "No, because if I did, I become them." That answer stayed with him long after. It reminded him that power, no matter how vast, means nothing without compassion guiding it. When the company officially launched the Bennett Initiative, they held a grand ceremony. Grace stood on stage in a simple white dress, elegance radiating from her composure. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes. "True power," she began, "isn't about position or wealth. It's about how we treat others when no one is watching." The hall grew silent, moved by her sincerity. When she ended her speech, the audience erupted in applause that felt endless. Oliver rose from his front row seat, pride evident in his eyes. "To Grace Pierce," he said, raising his glass. "A woman who turned pain into purpose." The crowd cheered. Grace blushed, whispering, "This isn't about me, it's about change." But deep inside, she knew she had become something greater than she ever imagined, a symbol of courage for every woman who had ever been underestimated. Not everyone celebrated her success. A few jealous employees began whispering that Grace's rise came only from her marriage. She heard the rumors but refused to respond. Instead, she kept working, mentoring young analysts and helping others find their voice. One afternoon, she found an anonymous note on her desk. "You don't belong here." She didn't tear it up. She framed it. When Oliver noticed, he asked why. "Because every time I look at it," she said softly, "I'm reminded that I do." Her quiet defiance inspired those around her. Even the cynics began to respect her discipline. She had proven that true strength doesn't roar, it endures. And in that endurance, she found peace. When a journalist uncovered her story, headlines exploded. "Humble analyst becomes billionaire's wife and company hero." Requests for interviews poured in. Grace accepted only one, an editorial focused on ethics, not glamour. In the feature, she said, "Humility is not weakness. It's knowing who you are without needing applause." The quote went viral across the business world. The story inspired thousands. Messages from women worldwide filled her inbox, victims of workplace cruelty who now felt seen. "You've started something far bigger than this company," Oliver told her. Grace smiled. "Good, because kindness should never stay confined to one building." That winter, Hart Marketing hosted a gala in Grace's honor. She arrived in an emerald evening gown, elegance defined. Colleagues greeted her warmly. Even executives from rival firms attended. When she took the stage, her voice carried calm power. "We rise not by pushing others down, but by lifting them when they fall." Her words brought many to tears. Oliver joined her on stage, wrapping his arm around her. "To Grace Pierce," he declared, "proof that grace's power and humility wins." Cameras flashed, applause thundered, and in that moment, Grace realized her story had transcended survival. It had become legacy. Soon, global companies reached out to partner with the Bennett Initiative. Some invited Grace to consult on workplace reforms. One even offered her a seat on an international ethics board. Oliver teased, "You're more in demand than I am." She laughed softly. "I don't want fame, Ollie. I want fairness." Her simplicity disarmed everyone who met her. That night, as they watched London skyline from their balcony, Oliver took her hand. "You've made me see power differently," he admitted. "You've taught me that respect lasts longer than fear." Grace smiled. "And you've shown me that love can protect without controlling." Their bond, forged through storms, had become unbreakable. But success breeds envy. A rival firm launched a rumor claiming Grace's promotion was nepotism. Online tabloids ran with it, twisting facts, mocking her marriage. Oliver was furious, but Grace remained calm. "If they can't challenge your skill, they'll attack your story," she said. "Let truth defend itself." She held a press conference, poised and confident. "If being married disqualifies a woman from success," she said, "then perhaps we need to redefine equality." Her words went viral, silencing critics overnight. The scandal faded as quickly as it began, replaced by admiration. Her calm dignity turned even enemies into reluctant admirers. Grace had once feared being invisible. Now, she shone brighter than ever. A year later, the Bennett Initiative was adopted by firms across Europe. Grace's name became synonymous with ethical reform. She was invited to keynote at universities, where she told young professionals, "Never mistake silence for weakness. Sometimes silence is strategy." Her influence reshaped corporate culture far beyond heart marketing. Oliver watched her on stage one day, overwhelmed by pride. "You've built something that will outlive us," he said later. She smiled. "That's all I ever wanted." Grace didn't chase glory. She cultivated goodness. Her story was proof that power and kindness could coexist. The girl once mocked for her thrift now stood as a global symbol of dignity. On the anniversary of the Bennett Initiative, Grace stood before her team in the company auditorium. "We've learned," she said, "that humility isn't silence, it's strength under control. It's standing tall even when others try to make you small." Her team applauded, inspired. In that moment, she saw younger versions of herself in their eyes, people who finally believed that decency could win. As the applause faded, Oliver approached from the back, smiling proudly. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Grace nodded, glancing one last time at the company that had once broken her, and which she had rebuilt from its ashes. "Yes," she said softly, "I'm finally home." That's the end of the story. What did you learn about the story? Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Thanks for watching.